After I did Cast Another Spell, Glenn was there, and I remember he called me up afterwards, and he was like, "So, what do you think? You want to come work for us and be in house?" And I distinctly go, "Oh, no, I'm not ready to retire yet. No. Give me 10 years."
No offense,
but no. I was like appalled, like the thought. I said, "Oh no!" I literally said to him, "I have movies to make." Right? Yeah.
It's like, what am I doing?
I know.
You're listening to The Other 50%, a herstory of Hollywood. I'm Julie Harris Walker. This is the show where we talk to successful women in entertainment and hear their stories. This week I was lucky enough to sit down and talk with Ginny Nugent. Ginny is the Senior Vice President of Physical Production at HBO, where she oversees films and series. We talked about lots of things, including her journey to get where she is and the continuing evolution of this business. Here, have a listen. What was your path to get where you are?
My path really started from college. I went to Stanford. I was an art history major. New. I went to Florence. They had a program there. I was there for 6 months in Italy. How great is that?
That sounds nice.
And one of the classes I took was an Italian neorealism class. And one of the movies we watched is called Blow Up. It's an Antonioni film from the 1960s. It was shot in England, and it's kind of it's about a still photographer. And in the story, there's a scene where he's shooting photos, and he's in a big park, and in the back, it's an open field, and there are bushes in the background. Takes pictures, doesn't think anything of it. Comes back to his dark room when we had dark rooms, and you're watching him develop these photos, and all of a sudden he sees something, and he starts to blow it up bigger and bigger and bigger, and there's a body underneath these bushes. And so it kind of sets off this whole plot. And that moment, I was sitting in the outside like, that was so cool. Like, that was when I was like, oh, I want to do that. However, whatever that is, like, to tell a story and have people feel like, oh my God, that's amazing. I was like, that's what I want to do. So that
was your moment.
That was my moment. I was just like, I don't know anybody in the film business. I don't understand how you do it or what. I just know that I want to make that moment for other people because I thought it was the coolest thing ever.
Wow.
Yeah, it was great. So I then went back to Stanford, which is not a good film school, actually.
Turns out.
The closest thing was a communications department that we'd make little Super 8 films out in trailers. We didn't even have a building. I think they have a building now. And I changed my major, so I was taking Communications 1 my senior year at 8 in the morning. All the football players.
Yes.
And I thought at the time, forget art history. I wasn't going to work in a museum, but I thought I would go and get a graduate degree. Because everybody at Stanford, they're law, medical, and in film, I just didn't, because I literally didn't know anybody, and so I was dubbing my final 2-minute film, whatever it was. I'll go Super 8.
I just hear the tick, 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 tick.
Yeah, and the professor who was there was from the Canadian Broadcasting System. I can't remember his name. He was so great. He was asking what I was going to do, and I hadn't applied anywhere, mind you. I was thinking of going to film school. And he looked at me and he was like, oh, no. You don't need a graduate degree in film. You need to move to LA. Now, this is in the 80s. And get any job you can and just learn on the job. People are great. They'll teach you whatever you want to know. You just need to get there and start working.
Best advice ever.
Ever, right? Because he goes, otherwise, you're, even as a graduate student, you'll have that master, you'll still start at the bottom. So he goes, just get down there and do it. And I was like, oh, it's kind of a radical thought, right?
Yeah.
And so one of the other things I did my senior year is I programmed a film series of classic films, things I'd never seen, of course I had. And through that, I got to know the head of the department. And he was friends with a Hollywood producer named Roger Corman. And it turned out Roger went to Stanford. And my freshman year, spring break, after I'd kind of gotten this message of, you need to go to LA, Roger called my advisor, this guy Henry Brightrose, and said, I need an assistant. Do you have anybody? And thinking. And so he told me about it. And on my spring break, I went down and did a meet and greet. And I didn't know it was a meet and greet yet. I just thought, oh, he wants to meet me. Okay. And at that moment in time, you have to remember there's no internet.
Mm-hmm.
There's no home computers.
There's no cell phones.
No, there's no cell phones. I had to go to the library to look up who Roger Corman was. And what I found were all these B movies that he directed, Wasp Woman and the original Little Shop of Horrors and, I don't know, all the Edgar Allan Poe movies that Vincent Price did, like kind of B movie, schlocky, horror, or whatever. And so I'm like I love Fellini and I got all these art films.
I'm way too snooty for Roger Corman.
Right, exactly. Right. I was like, who is this guy? Right. But anyway, it was great. So I went down, and I'd never been to LA, and I drove down, the boyfriend at the moment. And I must have spent maybe 10 minutes with Roger. And in that time, he had me come in. I sat down, and he was talking to Francis Ford Coppola on the phone.
Oh, my God.
So, and it was at the moment Francis was doing. Anyway, he was recreating Las Vegas on a sound stage in LA, and I of course am listening to this conversation. And Roger was like, "Francis, I don't understand. Las Vegas actually exists. Why do you feel like you?
And it's half an hour away,
right? Why do you feel you have to, recreate it?" And I didn't hear Francis' answer, but I'm sure it was something like, it's hyper reality. I need to have control, or whatever it was. And Roger's like, okay. So he hangs up, sits down, and he, where are you from? And in his mind, he heard Boston, Catholic, dad's a cop, scholarship to Stanford. Like, that's kind of what he heard. That's what he took away. And said, thank you very much. I went back to school, and like 2 weeks later, he called me and said his assistant had decided to go live with her boyfriend in Germany, and did I want to come down and be his assistant? And I was like, sure. I didn't even ask how much I made. I had no idea. I was like, sure, I'll be done in, a month. And he was like, great, come down.
Because you had all the qualifications.
Right.
Boston, Godfather.
Right. But what was funny is later, in his mind, he had decided that I came from a family of like 8 children.
Well, of course.
Yeah,
Boston Catholic.
But it was like
Italian.
Right, exactly, Italian. And I had
maybe Irish too.
Yeah. I kept having. It's like for years, like it was a running gag. He'd be like, "All your siblings," and I was like, "I have 2." Anyway, it was kind of fun. So that was it, and that was my entree.
What movies did you do with him?
Oh boy. Let's see. I worked on Slumber Party Massacre, Deathstalker, Barbarian Queen, which starred Lana Clarkson. Do you remember her? She's one woman who was killed by, we assume she was killed by Phil Spector.
Oh.
She was a hostess then.
Right.
Yeah, we cast her in Deathstalker.
Allegedly,
yes, although he is serving time. Let's see what else. We were doing movies in, Roger was a big proponent of doing movies in third world countries, so we were shooting stuff in the Philippines and Argentina. Like Deathstalker was in Argentina, and Barbarian Queen. I got to go down on one show, which was called Cocaine Wars. And then I worked on a lovely movie called Chopping Mall, about killer robots in the Sherman Oaks Galleria. The tagline was, where shopping will cost you an arm and a leg. And then the last film I really did there was called Munchies. It was great. It was my graduate school, and I think back, literally scripts would come in to Roger, he'd decide to do them or not, and then I was there, so I was part of everything from the pre-production to giving script notes, the casting, the actual shooting, the looking at all the cuts. I used to run his projector, which is where I met my husband, to looking at the poster and arguing with the MPAA. I forget, we did some Wasp Woman movie where we had an actress, or not an actress, a model who had 2 sets of breasts. There's some kind of creature thing. And we were arguing with the MPAA about the undercleavage between the 2 sets of breasts on the poster, like what was appropriate or not.
How do you rate that?
Yeah. So yeah, it was great. I mean, I have to say, I literally learned like everything from A to B, and then I was this is another moment, right? So I'd been there about 3.5 years. I was getting a little burnt out. I'd just done Munchies, and I thought, okay, I've done it. I've really done it from beginning to end. I want to do more. I wanted to do bigger films, which wasn't possible at Roger. And right at that moment, two things were happening. One is videotape. Videos were out, and Roger had just gotten an output deal with MGM to make $1 million movies direct to video. I didn't want to do that. I wanted to work on features. So I was sort of like, And at the same time, there was a filmmaker named Jim Wynorski who was about to do a sequel to a movie Roger had done called Big Bad Mama. And the original had Robert De Niro and Angie Dickinson in it. It was a gangster movie. This is way back when. And Roger had just gotten, so this was probably 85, 86. He had just gotten Angie Dickinson to agree to come back. She was now like the grandmother instead of the hot babe, I think, to do this Big Bad Mama 2. And Jim Wynorski had written it. And Jim is a really interesting guy. He really loved women with big breasts. That was his thing.
Well, who doesn't?
I know. If you look at any of his movies, he's done a lot of like giant-breasted women. So he came into my office, and this was like the moment I knew I had to go. And he sat down, and he's like, "Ginny, Roger said yes. We're gonna make Big Bad Mama 2, and Angie's in." And he's so excited. And he's like, "So we gotta get starting on the casting process. We gotta get some girls who'll take them out and let them breathe." And I was like, "I can't do this anymore. I can't do it anymore."
Done.
Yeah, he had this belt buckle. God bless Jim Wynorski, I'm sure he's still around. That said, "I bring joy to women." So I like in my head I was like, "That's it. I can't go down this road again. I'm done. It's
over.
It's over and done." So, and then right around that time, I met the person who became my husband. He was doing he was cutting like his second movie ever. It was a film called Hard Bodies about, girls in bikinis on the beach.
Sure.
But anyway, the movie turned out really well for what it was. It was a TNA comedy. And Roger was so excited because we sold it to a studio for like $2 million, and we had spent under $5 million.
Nice.
So typical Roger, like I said, brilliant businessman. With those great credits under our belt, I reached out to one of the women that I met while I was working at Rogers, which was Gail Ann Hurd. She had used the studio down in Venice to do pickups on the first Terminator. And I liked her. And there was another assistant at Rogers who I still owe a big debt to as well as Gail, a woman named Ellen Collett. And at some point we had built up, we were making more shows, so we need 2 assistants. And she had left before me. She came after me and left before me. And she was the head of development for Gail's company. And Gail had a deal over at Fox at this point. And I reached out to both of them. I was like, "You got to get me out of here. Help me. I'll do anything. Just help me." And Gail was great. She had her deal at Fox, and I budgeted some things for her. And then the first thing that went was a horror film called Bad Dreams, which was a ripoff of the Nightmare movies, basically. And it was a young filmmaker named Andy Fleming was directing. He was right out of NYU. He was maybe 22. And I was probably 25, maybe 26. It was so exciting to me because it was, I had $5 million to make it. I had Teamsters, which meant I didn't have to drive the camera truck like I used to with Roger. We had a craft service person, so I didn't have to fill my car with drinks.
Oh my God, you were rich.
Yeah, truly. It was DGA, so I had ADs who actually knew what the job was. It was still non-union, non-IA in LA, which under a certain level, I guess you could get away with. And it was truly one of the most fun I ever had on a movie. Andy was delightful and prepared, and it was, a horror movie with lots of blood and craziness, but it was exciting. We shot for 40 days.
Oh my God.
I know. So then that started my freelance career, and I did 2 other movies for Gail. One was for HBO called Cast a Deadly Spell, and the other was Tremors, which was for Universal. And then I just started, I freelanced for 15 years, more or less. The last film I did was a studio film called Anywhere But Here, and Susan Sarandon, Natalie Portman, Wayne Wang directed it. And I finally, because most of my career, if you look at it, they're horror movies. Tremors, monsters. I got calls for monster movies all the time. And when I finally got Anywhere But Here, I was like, I've hit the big time. It's a relationship movie. It's people talking. It's in LA. We shot it in the summer. The locations were all within like 20 minutes of my house. It was really a lovely experience. Movie didn't do that well, but for me,
I liked that movie.
Yeah, it was sweet. It's based on a book. It was sweet. And right around that time, in between all of that, I had twin girls. They were just reaching first grade after I finished Anywhere But Here. And two things happened. One was I had done Polly for DreamWorks. And I had gotten a call from DreamWorks to go meet Cameron Crowe. He was doing a movie called Almost Famous for them. And so I was just finishing Anywhere But Here, and I went in and met him and his producer, and the meeting went great, and I got a call from DreamWorks. He loves you. We're going to hire you, and you're going to, and I thought, oh, this is perfect, because I had a great accountant, great production man. I go, guys, we're going to be able to just jump onto this movie. This road movie is going to be fantastic. Great. So that lasted about 2 days. This is how my life was directly affected by Steven Spielberg. So I thought I had my next show, right? We're all gearing up. We're going to do this. And Steven was supposed to do a movie called Memoirs of a Geisha. And they were going to shoot it in Japan. And he had a great his usual line producer, whose name I'm blanking on. Really good guy, experienced guy. And somewhere amongst all of the time I'm meeting Cameron Crowe for DreamWorks, whatever, Steven decides he doesn't want to shoot Memoirs of a Geisha anymore. He doesn't want to direct it. He wants somebody else to do it. So by changing his mind, for whatever reason, that line producer who had a pay-or-play deal with DreamWorks suddenly didn't have a movie. So, and as a studio exec, I see what they were doing. And so they basically said, oh, Ginny, I'm really sorry. He's available. We have to pay him anyway. We're putting him on the camera.
Oh, they gave him your movie.
They gave him my movie.
Mm-hmm.
So I was a little disappointed.
Yeah.
But so that happened. And then at the same time, my kids were graduating from kindergarten, and I tripped over a curb and I broke my ankle. So, and I'd been working, so my kids were I stayed home 18 months when they were first born, and then I went back to work, and I just did show to show. I brought them on location, and they were little, and it was great, and the nanny, or at least I thought it was great. So then I thought, okay, I'm going to take the summer off, because I broke my ankle, and I've been working so hard, and I was just going to kind of see what happened. I was still kind of disappointed over Almost Famous. And at that moment in time, though, a lot of shows were going to Canada, right? That's where the only incentive was. And I had this conversation with my husband. I still remember it. Those moments when I actually admitted he was right. It's one of those, right? Which was, I said I was budgeting another movie for Andy Fleming, who I'd worked with a couple times, who I really liked, and it was going to shoot in Vancouver. And I said to my husband, I go, well, next fall, if this happens, we won't be able to bring our nanny because she was illegal. We'll have to find somebody else in Vancouver, and I'll just get a tutor, and they'll be in the trailer, and it'll be a cultural experience. And my husband just looked at me and he was like, "They're not going to be Carney kids, Ginny. No, you can go." Right? Very supportive of my career. My husband's amazing. He's like, but the kids need to be in school. They start in first grade. They need to have a routine. You can go, but the nanny and I will make sure the kids have, a stable life, right? Hold down the fort. And in that moment, I was like, oh, I hate it when he's right. I just hate it. Because I knew instantly, because our kids did not transition well. They were very, they liked their routine. And I was like, oh, you're right. So I know, right? And then the other moment, all these things happen. So I'm driving, have the boot on, right, on my broken ankle, and my kids at this point so there was 5 or 6 somewhere in there, and I'm driving, and we're going to the grocery store, something routine. The nanny wasn't with us. My kids are in the back, and I hear this little voice go, "Mommy, what happens when you die?" Right? Kind of profound. And I was like, oh. And I I don't know, made something up, like, well, no one really knows, honey, and
It's a
that's where
mystery.
religion comes in, and they have all these different theories, and there's this and heaven, but no one really knows, whatever. But it struck me afterwards. I was like, oh my God, what if my nanny had been, like, what if they'd asked my nanny that question, which they may have done, right? And suddenly I was like, oh my God, because I don't even know what I'm missing out on.
Yeah.
And why did I have children? Like, I literally was like, why did I have children? Because when I was shooting, the nanny would come, I'd see them for 20 minutes before something would happen, or they would say, I want to go to a craft service, or they were like, oh, let's put a video on in the trailer. And I really that was my midlife crisis of like, wait a minute, why did I have children?
What am I doing?
And if I go to Vancouver, I'll be gone for 9 months. Could I really do that? Anyway, I had my moment, and what I do always is I just talk to all my girlfriends, and I was like, what am I going to do? I'm going to have to become a wedding planner. Like, what do I do with these skills? Seriously.
It's always like, am I going to do my career, or am I going to work at Starbucks?
Yeah, I know.
These are my options.
Right. I really, and I was thinking I was turning 40 then. Everything kind of...
That sounded old.
Really old. Like, everything came at once. And so one of the people I met for lunch was a person I met when I did Tremors. She'd been a coordinator back then, but her name was Sarah Spring. She was now an production executive at Paramount. And we were having lunch. She goes, oh, she was a new single mom. She had divorced, and she had 2 little kids. And she's like, I got to tell you, Jenny, this production exec stuff, really good for the family balance, work balance thing. You travel a little bit, which is great. You get a break, but you're home and you can plan your vacations and you can plan going to the school play. And she's like, it's really kind of great, because you might want to think about it.
To it.
Yeah. And she goes, and by the way, I had just had lunch with Jay Rowe, who's over at HBO, and Sarah had temped, one of the production execs had gone out on maternity leave, and Sarah had come in to temp, which is where she got the taste of it, and then she went to Paramount. And she's like, I think you guys would like each other. And I was like, okay. So I met Jay. She introduced us. I met Jay. I think our meeting was like 2 hours long. I just immediately, we had this similar way of making movies and how you treat people, and everything was, I was like, oh, he's very cool. So I think I interviewed at least 6 or 7 more times over a course of 2 or 3 months.
But now you see they invest in people because they know you're going to be there a good long time.
Yeah, well, I didn't know that at the time. I felt like I was compromised. I was giving up my production career, which was true.
You're going to slum it at HBO.
I was going to say, I felt like I was retiring. Because after I did Casa del Spell, Glenn was there, and I remember he called me up afterwards, and he was like, so, what do you think? You want to come work for us and be in house? And I distinctly go, oh, no, I'm not ready to retire yet. No. Give me 10 years.
No offense,
but no. I was like appalled, like the thought. I was like, oh no, I literally said to him, I have movies to make. Right? Yeah.
It's like, what am I doing?
I know. At the time, he used to have his putter in his office all the time. He was so great. So I reminded him of that when I had to interview again. I was like, okay, I'm 40 now. I'm ready. 10 years later, or more than 10 years. So anyway, it was a process of 3 months of interviews, and then they brought me on as in the green rack, right? So that it's like a trial period, which I definitely wanted to, because I really wasn't convinced that I was going to like it. I was like, and I have to say, it took a full year before I really understood what the job was. Because I kept feeling like all I did was move information around. Like, this happened, let me tell you. And I'll tell you, and I'll tell you, and I'll tell you. Okay, and what do we want to do? Okay, and then I was kind of going back. And so I really felt ineffective. Like, I just was kind of like, eh. And I had lunch, yet again, with another, he was an exec at Sony. Anyway, he was lovely. And he had been a producer and had become a production exec as well. And I was telling him, I was like, I just don't know if this is for me. I don't understand. And he was great. And he said, oh, no. You're missing the point here, Jenny. This is where your power lies. So if something happens on the set, and how you represent it to your bosses is how they interpret it. They will trust
they
you,
react.
and they will react depending on if you come in and you're like, oh my God, these filmmakers are so awful. They won't listen. They just, they're spendthrifts. They're wasting money. They're horrible, horrible, horrible. Then you're going to get a different reaction as if you come in and it's like, oh, they had a bad day. But they're really trying hard. And I was like, it was that light bulb. And I went, oh, I get it. And Ray Zimmerman, that's who told me that. And I was like, oh, right. Oh, okay. I totally get that. Of course, I could see how that. And because my sympathies always were with the filmmakers, because I knew, and I still know, and I try to remind myself, it's really hard to make a movie.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to make a good movie.
So you're their advocate.
I usually, yes.
Okay, so tell me this. In your life, in your family, have you always been the breadwinner?
Well, yes and no. Andy freelanced. We both freelanced for 15 years. Together at the same time, so I would say it was fairly equal through that time. Our original theory was, okay, when one of us is working, the other would be home with the nanny. Every time one of us would get a job, the other would get a job. Right? The rules of freelancing. So oftentimes we would both be working, and the nanny was with the children. And he didn't go out of town very often, to be honest. So he was always, I would be the one that would go out sometimes. And then as the kids went into school, and that's when I joined HBO, the kids were in private school then, and just not ever knowing, like, to me, I felt like my options, if I wanted to stay home and be around for my kids, my options were limited of what production I could do in town. I didn't know anything about series. They weren't going to hire me to do a series because that was very segregated then. I felt at that moment my options were of being a freelance line producer and wanting only to do shows in LA so I could be around my kids wasn't realistic, and that I wouldn't be working all the time. So that the opportunity to work at HBO was a good one for my family. And Andy's, he's still freelances, so he on and off the, freelance life. Yeah. He's never, actually I take that back. He worked at Disney for 2 or 3 years working on an animated film, which felt like a real job. You know, 9 to 5, and so I would say I'm not the sole, I've never been the sole breadwinner, but I became the steady breadwinner, especially as the kids went into their school years.
Did you ever then have to consciously negotiate with your husband what that looked like and division of labor? Like, did it ever bring up any, like, unconscious gender role stuff you had to work out?
Not really. I have to say I'm very fortunate because my husband has always, from the day I met him, been really supportive of my working. There was never a conversation about, well, when we have kids, you're going to stay home and take care of them, right? Like, right. It just never happened. We had been together 6 years before we had children. So by then, like, we do have a routine, which I notice when he goes out of town, of like what he does and what I do, and but we do a lot of things together. Usually the yard stuff we do together, and grocery shopping we do together. I tend to be the person who plans the meals for the week, and then because I get home late, he cooks. So we try to. I mean, I think if my kids look, they'll think of their dad as definitely being a homebody and doing stuff around the house as well. They won't think, oh, mom did everything. And I'm lucky enough, we have a housekeeper comes in once a week who does, like,
thank God.
The
heavy lifting.
Yeah, the heavy lifting. So, we've been really fortunate.
Yeah. So you girls, how do you think, your having a career has affected them and what they see as possible for themselves?
Absolutely. I'll tell you 2 stories that are kind of funny. My daughter, Barbara, wants to work in the film and television business. And she's had a job as a set PA, and now she's an office PA on another show, not an HBO show. And she loves it. Like, she loves the job. She doesn't like the hours so much, but she... she understands the business more because she's been around it. Like and she consumes so much media. It's unbelievable, but that's what we do. My other daughter is still in college and is talking about going to med school. She has rejected any kind of media. Like I got her to see Star Wars. That was a huge accomplishment. But she's like, I don't understand why you always want to go see movies. Like she just doesn't.
What a waste of time.
Total waste of time. Like she really, like to her, television is there to numb your mind and just relax. And she, when she watches her bad Kardashian reality shows, whatever. So Barbara was, so she's 23 now, and she's dating a 25-year-old guy. He's a PhD in computer science at UCLA.
Wow.
Nice kid. And they've been dating a month. She just told me the story. They've been dating a month, and he said to her, Barbara, you're a real person. And she said, what do you mean by that?
What were you expecting?
Yeah, what does that mean? He goes, well, a lot of the girls I date, they're just looking for a guy who's got a good job so they can get married and have kids. Like, they're just looking for a meal ticket. But I think with you, like, you've got a career you want to do, and she's got her horse, and you've got your friends, and like, if we broke up, you would be totally fine. And she just looked at him. She was like, of course I would. Like,
this is unusual in 20-somethings? There's still a crop of women going for their MRS degree?
That's what I said to her.
What?
That's exactly what I said to my daughter. And my daughter said to him, who are you hanging out with? You're hanging out with the wrong, you're picking the wrong girls. Like, I could show you all my friends are all the same. We've all gone to college, we all have careers. We're all like, really, dude? Like, you think we're looking for somebody to support us? So I know, right? So I know that, and I've always, and this is something my mother taught me, but it's like, it's not enough to have a job. You have to have a career.
Yeah.
And you always, always, always need to be able to take care of yourself, support yourself, because you just don't know what life is going to bring, truly. So you need to have a career. And so both of them.
Wait, your mother told you that?
My mother told me that. Mm-hmm. My mother, who was a stay-at-home mom, told me that.
That's interesting.
And I think what it was is, and my mom never went to college. She graduated high school in the middle of World War II. So there were no men around. Yeah. And she worked for Raytheon, working, as a secretary in a war company, whatever they did. And when she had 3 children after me, I was the third, was when they could afford for her to not work at night. So my dad used to work in the day, she used to work at night, because they had to, to make ends meet. And it was a status thing for her to be able to stay home and just watch the kids.
Yeah.
And that was in the 50s and 60s. Like, that was what you aspired to do.
Did you feel like she regretted not having
a career? Yeah, I do. Because I think that, again, World War II was a huge event. And she also had grown up during the Depression. Like, they were just, it was a different world. Like, you just had to deal with the cards you were dealt. And they survived, and their family survived, and they were very lucky. Where it was most noticeable was when I went off to college. I was the youngest. And I moved
of 8. I've heard.
Yeah, those other 5 mystery children. So when I went off, she was probably in her 50s. And so the empty nest happened, and she had a very hard time because she was very nurturing, caregiver. That's all she'd ever done, for the last, 25 years, or 20 years. And it took her a while to figure out, and she volunteered and did all that stuff, but she didn't have a career. It felt like she could go back to being a teacher or a nurse
So she had to find occupation.
Yeah. And she took care of her mom, and then my dad retired, and they had a good maybe 5 to 10 years before he got lung cancer and died shortly after. But that was one thing I noticed. And then the other thing is her sister's husband died when he was 39 from a heart attack.
Oh, my God.
He had 3 kids. And she was just like my mom, working as a secretary. And there wasn't the safety net. There was some Social Security. But her sister had to go out and get a job.
Yeah.
And it was hard. And her sister was very smart, and she went to school at night. She worked during the day, school at night, got her MBA. She became an HR executive at an architectural firm in Harvard Square in Boston. Many years, many years. So my mom saw what happened to her sister, and I think that also fed into her saying to us, "You have to have a career. Go to school now." You know, all my siblings and I all finished college. My parents didn't make a lot of money, so we all got scholarships and loans and worked our way through. And I think that was one of the things they were most proud of, is all their kids went to college.
Yeah.
Because neither of them did.
It's a big deal.
Yeah.
Now, it's Barbara who's working in the business?
Yes.
How has it been for her being a young woman in this business?
I think, well, she's only done 2 shows, but we had a potential sexual harassment situation on a show. She was working on an HBO show, not one of mine, as a set PA. I knew the producer. I was like, "Could you do me a favor?" and so everybody knew. So she was on there as a set PA, and there were maybe 6 set PAs. And towards middle to the end of the movie, there was a male. Like the senior most set PA was a male, 30 years old-ish, married. He started having an affair with another 22-year-old set PA. Not my daughter, thank God. So, okay, I mean, they're adults, whatever. However, they would, there was one trailer that housed all the production. Everybody put their bags there, and the walkie-talkie battery rechargers were in there, and all your paperwork, like all your supplies, would be in there. And so Barbara mentioned to me, she just mentioned, she didn't actually think anything of it. She's like, I went to try to get a new battery for my walkie-talkie, and they're in there heavy petting, and I had to like back out of the trailer, and it was like, and I had to go find the kid who does the batteries to see if there was another battery somewhere else. And so she just mentioned this to me, and I went, wait.
Hold on.
I was like, hold on, honey. That's not okay.
Right.
I was like, that's creating a hostile work environment for you. That's not allowed. Like, you have to do something about it. And she's like, well, I'm not going to tattle on the mom. And I was like, no. Honestly, this really isn't okay. You can't do your job in a, without feeling uncomfortable. That's not okay. So what you need to do is you need to go to your second AD, right, who's in charge of all PAs, and you need to tell him that this happened. And she was like, really? I was like, yeah, you need to do it.
Yeah.
Because not my show, I didn't want to, whatever. But thankfully, so she did. So she went to the second AD, and the second AD said, oh my God, Barbara, I'm so sorry. That should never happen. I will talk to them. That you're absolutely right. It's not the way it's supposed to be. And I really never liked that guy anyway. And, if I could have replaced him earlier, I would have, because he's not a good PA.
Well, he's not working.
Yeah, exactly. And so the second AD took care of it. Talked to them like,
well done.
You can't do that, and you can go in the trailer anytime you want. But what it made me realize, and then there was a secondary part of that. So once this PA and the 2 PAs got together, everybody on the set knew. And then the other grips and electricians, the males who Barbara had dealt with many times, whatever, suddenly thought it was okay to hit on Barbara. And there's another female PA. It was suddenly like, oh, well, if those 2 can get together, right?
That's what we're doing on this show. Then.
That's what we're doing on this show. It's like an open game, or, it's like open season.
Yeah.
And so suddenly she goes, oh, now I'm getting hit on, rather than, but in the beginning it was all good. Like, she could talk to people, this is what I need, you're hanging out with them, it's all great. But suddenly it changed, because nothing had happened. Mm-hmm. But then that got corrected, and it kind of eased up a little bit. So there was
interesting.
There was this like secondary unintended consequence of if she hadn't dealt with it.
Yeah.
Now, if she hadn't told me, she wouldn't have dealt with it, because she wouldn't have known, which is what brought me back to the HBO piece of it. So this was an HBO show, And after it finished, because it was kind of at the end, I went to my boss and I said, this happened. I told my daughter, she went to the right person, all taken care of, like the way it was supposed to be. I go, but what it made me realize is at HBO, we have our anti-sexual harassment chat with all the department heads. And everybody in their paperwork signs, like, I'm not going to sexually harass people. No one reads it. My daughter signed it. She didn't know what I was even talking about. And I was like, well, don't you remember all that stuff you signed? She was like, what are you talking about? And I said to my boss, I go, I think we have a hole in our system. Because just having we do a 5-minute conversation. The lawyers come in, they're like, this is what it is. Don't do it. Mm-hmm. And that does not trickle down to the set PAs, right, who she wasn't even hired when you had that meeting. Like, she didn't start till the first day. And so all the seconds and thirds, all the guys who were like hitting on her, they don't get that either. So we've done a review of our procedures to see if there isn't a way that we either draw the entire crew, and we also don't hit the cast either, right, on the movies. I guess they do on the series side. But there are a number of people who don't verbally hear, it's not okay. This is what it is. These are examples. Don't do it. So the good news is we've done a review, and we're looking at perhaps before you can, when you fill out your start paperwork, you have to have watched. We're looking at these different videos that you have to watch and do, like we do on the HBO side, right? Yeah. And then they can tell that you've watched it, and then you put your start paperwork in, and you'll get paid. But if you don't do it, it's part of your process. And one of the reasons that came up is because at the colleges now, both my daughters at different schools had to do that. You had to complete your, sexual harassment video before you could register for classes. And I thought, okay, well, that's good. At least I looked at something, some part of it. Because
and they don't move forward until you've spent enough time on each page.
Exactly. So that was her first experience.
Yeah.
So it turned out fine,
But had you not intervened and told her, she could have gone away thinking, oh, that's how this business is.
Absolutely.
And this is what I have to put up with. And am I just going to put up with it, or am I going to go work someplace else? And then it perpetuates for years.
Exactly.
Well, it's hopeful that the right thing happened.
Yeah, right. Well, that
progress.
Yes, exactly. And then when I told the producer about it, the producer was like, he had no idea that all this was going on with his set PAs, and because he's always up by camera, right? And he's like, I think I need to take a few more walks around. I'd like check in a little bit more, and I was like, yeah, I think you do, because they, And the other thing is, she doesn't know what's normal,
right?
As you say, like she thinks, oh, that's how it is, because there are way many more men on set than there are women. We're still in that place.
Yeah.
So,
what do you think the next step is for women in this business to get more parity?
I think we have to be in the decision-making seats. Honestly, I think we have to fight to be in the room. If it's a group situation, to decide what shows actually get made, and just to have our voices heard, and because they're not, they're definitely not. I think. And it's not just women. I mean, the diverse voices are not being heard either.
Yeah.
But certainly, I mean, I have this radical idea, which I keep saying out loud, hoping that it will happen, that at HBO, when you look at all the people who run departments, half of them should be women.
Yeah.
They're not. Like, why? We're half the population. Why? Like, that's a goal. Okay, so why can't we aspire to make that happen?
And why is that a radical notion? That's the most surprising thing. Like, did you hear the Ruth Bader Ginsburg quote when they say how many women will be enough on the Supreme Court? And she said, well, 9.
Yeah.
It's been 9 men forever, and no one bats an eye. Like, but that was like, what? Don't be crazy.
Yeah, right. I'm just looking for half.
Yeah.
And even that is huge. Like, if you, I mean, I was a line producer as a woman. I was often the youngest for a long time. I was very lucky, and I did low budget stuff. And there were times when I had to go up against particularly union guys, union reps, DPs, people who've been around for a long time, and I'd be like, what are you talking about? We're not doing that.
Yeah.
And
because they start with, I've been in this business for 20 years. I have never, whatever you're asking me to do.
Yeah, right. And it's like, well, okay, but we're not doing that on this show.
Yeah.
Or we don't have the money to do this. We need to come up with another idea. Or
there's a new sheriff in town.
Yeah, right. And it was hard sometimes. And I tended to, and I didn't, I think back, but I hired more women than normal on my crews. When I think back, I would say to the key grips and the gaffers, I need to see some female faces on your crew. And there weren't that many. And getting a female DP back then, there were like 2.
Hard to find.
Really hard to find. And get them hired.
Yeah.
And camera, when I was line producing, there were increasingly a number of assistants who were female. And I don't know if you call it hazing, but man, those girls worked hard.
Yeah.
They were really put to the test, and look at those big giant cameras, and they were game. They didn't, this is what I do, and I don't need your help.
But as you're here, you're going to do it.
Right.
What do you think it is about your personality that allowed you to push through and have the success that you have?
That's an interesting question. I think part of it is I had a dad who's a cop who used to say to my sister and me, well, what are you going to do? You can do anything. What are you going to do? Or I can't wait to figure out what you're going to do. Like he was like when I was trying to decide what to do, what college, he's like, well, you can do anything. And he also said to me, you spend most of your life at your job, right? If you really look at how so if you love your job, it doesn't feel like work.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh yeah, which was like in my moment of like, I love going to movies. I want to be in that world because I love it.
Yeah.
And he was absolutely right. Like production hours, working 14, 16 hours a day, they went by so fast.
Yeah.
Every day was different. The challenges were different. The people were different. I loved it.
And you're making magic.
Yeah, right. The idea of getting 100 people to all come to the same place in the same moment to, shoot that object and get it perfect.
Yeah.
It's almost impossible, right? It's like wrangling cats.
It's a miracle every day.
It is. I just loved it. I loved it. Yeah, I'm too old for it, but I loved it.
Now it just sounds really tiring. Do you consider yourself a success?
Yes, I think. Yes, I think that the goal that I set out, I wanted to make movies. I did that. I think I work at a really great company that strives to do good stuff. I think that was one of the things I learned at Rogers is I didn't want to make schlocky stuff. Because some people stay in that realm forever, and you can make a lot of money doing that.
Yeah.
Money never drove me. I was much more about I really want to make good stuff. And once I had kids too, I really realized that kids absorb the media, the stuff that we create. It creates an impression of their world, of what life is like, and they learn things, and they learn bad things, and
it matters.
It matters. And I didn't, coming out of college and working at Rogers, I didn't realize that. I just worked on whatever job, however schlocky, however much violence or sex or whatever it was. It didn't matter. I didn't even think about who's actually going to watch this at the end of the day, and what are they going to take away.
You were learning how to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But by the time I got to HBO, because I'd worked on enough movies that at a certain point, in your career, for me, I always wanted to work, and we're both working. We had to work, but it became more and more important about what I was working on. Like, I wanted to get out of monster movies.
Yeah.
You know, I wanted to do something, you know, a relationship story about a mother and a daughter. I was like, oh. And then at HBO, the idea that they really cared about the quality and issues, and that was very attractive. Still, one of the reasons why I'm there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you a badass?
Not as much as I used to be. I had one of the... I don't think I really answered your question. What about my personality? I think I'm very tolerant of people. I have like a long fuse, and then when I go off, it's really not a pretty sight. I have like a high tolerance of crazy. You know, my family, I have a bunch of crazy people in my family, so like creative.
Could you name them?
Yeah, they know who they are. But honestly, I think my tolerance, I have a very high tolerance of chaos. And of keeping things in the air, of things being not settled.
Uncertain.
I can live with uncertainty. I can live in the gray area. And I can kind of keep the big picture. You know, I still work on that, but I try to keep what's best for the end product. Like that comes naturally to me. And so when I would work on films, when I was on the ground, you know, I could be very persuasive, and I always try to treat my crew with respect. I often work with the same people over and over again as I came to like them. But I worked for one producer, and he goes, I'm going to call you the velvet knife, because, you know, you come and you ask for stuff, and people don't even realize what they're giving you because they just like you. They just...
Your secret weapon.
Yes.
Likability.
Yeah, they just want to, you know, and you just get in there and you do what you got to do.
Yeah.
Because it's not easy firing people. That was like my least favorite thing to do. And as I progressed, even now, on production, because it's such a short amount of time and you only get one chance to get it right, I am much more brutal now about, okay, they have to go.
Yeah.
Like, you're not doing your job. Sorry, you got to go.
You don't have time.
Exactly. And back then, it took me a while to get to that place. I was much more tolerant, and I was, well, let's see if we can make it work. And now, with years of experience, it's like, no, you need to go.
You learn it's never worth it to nurse them along, because it's such a relief when they're gone, and you can move on.
And you're like, why
and
did I wait so long, right? Yeah.
Once you learn that lesson, then it's like, forget it.
Right.
Because the data shows for women to be successful, not only do you have to be very competent and very qualified, but you also have to be likable.
Yeah.
Which is not true for men.
Yep.
And you have that.
Yeah.
Like, naturally, I think. I can't tell you how many women, well, I can probably, it's several that I've met over the course of the years, and when we're talking about, who do you know, blah, 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 who have said to me, when I grow up, I want to be Ginny Nugent.
Oh, that's terrifying.
There are a lot of people out there.
Well, that's so sweet, I think. I don't know.
Thank you, Ginny.
Oh, you're welcome.
You've been listening to The Other 50%. I'm Julie Harris Walker. I want to thank Ginny Nugent for sharing her story. In fact, we talked so long, there is a bonus episode on the website with Ginny's war stories from production, as well as more of our talk. And special thanks to Jonathan Lucas for editing, Jay Rowe, Danny Rosner, and Allison McQuaid for the music. Please find us on iTunes and subscribe and leave a review, and on our website, theother50%.com, all spelled out, for added features and bios of our guests. Thanks for listening. See you next time.